Are calling our meeting of May 31st, 2022 to order. We will begin with our roll call, please. Madam Secretary.
Dean Bolton.
Here.
Katie Kavanaugh.
Here.
Mary Jabara. Vincent Lyon Callow. Andrew Phelps.
Here.
Melanie Lynn.
Here.
And I am here.
Okay, so we have 5 present and 2 absent. We are acknowledging quorum, and we are ready to proceed with this evening's agenda. There is going to be one opportunity for public comment during the course of the meeting, and that would be now. So I ask Madam Secretary, do you have any blue cards?
I do not.
You have no blue cards, and
Check with Matt.
we have no members of the public who are interested in addressing the board. So we will proceed with the agenda for the evening. Our first item is other action items, employment, and I'll ask for one of our board members to present the motion.
I can do that.
Thank you.
I move that the board approve the employment of Jane Hellrow Reynolds, math teacher at Okemos High School at Step 7, Division 2. John Heineck, math teacher at Okemos High School at Step 1, Division 1. Taylor Itzel Olson, special education teacher at Cornell and Hiawatha Elementary Schools at Step 1, Division 1. And Deborah Manis, social worker at Quinoa at Step 8, Division 2 of the teacher's salary schedule effective August 18, 2022, in accordance with sections 1230 Parent 2 and 1230A Parent 2 of the revised school code, conditioned upon receipt of acceptable criminal history checks and criminal records checks.
Support.
Thank you. Trustee Phelps and Trustee Taylor. Assistant Superintendent Keskis.
Hi, thank you. I'll kind of go through our candidates in order. We needed 2 math teachers at our high school. One of those teachers is going to help support some of our students who qualify for Title 1A services. And so that's a new program that we had started this school year. And our first teacher comes to us from Howell High School. And she's also been in a couple of other school districts. The committee really loved, and that's Jane Hellrow Reynolds. And they talked about her ability to utilize differentiated instructional strategies. A lot of the technologies that she mentions using, we also use Desmo, Socratic, and a couple of the other Go Formative. Like those are the kinds of softwares that our kids need, so that way we know exactly where they are and we can make sure that we're meeting them for instruction the next day. A lot of formative assessment experience. Our second candidate from the high school is Johnny Hune. And interestingly, I met Johnny during the Michigan State had a day where they had a workshop for teacher interviews. And so he's a brand new teacher. And so I actually reached out and shook Johnny's hand. So I'm glad I had that opportunity to share a little bit about Okemos Public Schools with all of the Michigan State secondary candidates, and I'm glad that we had that touch point. Johnny did a student teaching at Holt, and his cooperating teacher says that he's confident in the classroom, is skilled at facilitating class discussions. He guides students to explore the material, and his lessons are fun and engaging. And in his equity statement, he talks about how he's always been part of a diverse community. And as an Asian American to immigrant parents, being a part of inclusive communities is important to him. So in part of our long recruitment process, I think that Johnny's going to be a great addition for all of our students, but particularly for some of our Asian immigrant students to be able to see themselves reflected in one of our teachers. Next, we'll move to the elementary resource program. And Taylor Itzel Olson, she was very well thought of by both our panel and her her cooperating teachers. She's eager to learn and grow as a professional. Her references also state she's very professional. She asks good questions, seeks feedback from others, and she will go above and beyond to meet the needs of our students. And I'll just share this. This is a split position to accommodate an overflow. So this position has been posted for a while now. And when asked, because we have another opening in a resource classroom that would be in just one building, she said, "No, thank you. I'm gonna try this out. This is the job that I applied for, and this is the one that I'm sticking with." So I'm just really impressed by her, just her professionalism right out of the gate, her willingness to say, "This is what I applied for. This is the role that I wanted, and this is where I am." Last but not least, we have our social worker for Quinoa, and this is Deborah Manis. She's also, she has kind of an alternative pathway to becoming a social worker. She started off as a classroom teacher and has taught in several locations, but we thought that, and just talking to her references and our committee and going through the interview process, thought she was just, she was lights out good and really would meet the needs of our kids. And we're excited to bring her on board too. Without hesitation, he would hire her if given the opportunity. Was just a highlighted recommendation for Deborah Manis as well. So those are our 4 current hires. So we'll be hopefully presenting many more soon.
Are there any questions or comments? I'm just going to make a comment that I'm so excited and impressed by the fact that you reached out to one of those candidates, and we love hearing that. That is the kind of engagement effort that will get us to the results that we're looking for. So thank you for that. Thank you for your leadership in that. All right. There are no more questions or comments. All those, is this a roll call? Okay, all those then who are in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it and the motion passes. Thank you so much. The next items on the agenda are discussion items. The first discussion item is a budget update and priorities.
So we'll have Executive Director Lentz come up to the screen. And these next 3 items, again, were moved from our last board meeting just due to time constraints. Wanted to make sure we gave them ample time and opportunity for the board and community to kind of really enjoy and appreciate what we are sharing. So Executive Director Lentz is here and I will share my screen. Liz, which one do we want up first? This one is the one we want up first. And I'll make it larger. And this one should be in these are in your packet, board members too, if you can't read those. Yep. I'll make it bigger here so we can. I left my glasses downstairs, so if I can read it, everybody else can too.
So, every year, for the last, since I've been here, we, talk around this time of year, do we have space in our budget for other things, other items that are coming up and showing as a need? And so we work with with each of our building leadership directors and have them go through a process of identifying things that they may have thought of as a need that might have been coming out, and we work through those as a big group. We talk through them to make sure we understand. We rate them. We then look at them as a central office team and come up with a document that I'm to share with you, board members, as to what are the items that have risen to the top that says these are items that we need, that have come up and that we need. There's some more items that we have wants and we have dream about, and so we want to go through those individually with you, and then afford you a little time with some homework to go through and say, where do you think this falls from your lens? So Superintendent Hood and I are going to go through these. We've tag teamed them in the past. I think we'll continue to do that. The first item on the list is, as we start to look forward down the road, when we don't have all this COVID funding that we still have COVID grants, and we will have that for another 2 school years. But we know that there's some positions that we have funded in those grants that we may need to bring back into our general fund. And we don't want to have a point where we all of a sudden have 700,000, $700,000 to $900,000 worth of positions that we need to get into the general fund, all in one year. So what we're looking at is saying we need to do a set aside and build a dollar amount into the budget because we have all of our positions listed here: our director of DEI, our behavior specialist, our RTI coach, student support advisors at elementaries, et cetera. Anyway, so we want to start building this into the budget and putting a placeholder in there. We know when this fiscal year is over for 22-23, there will be a budget to actual variance because it's going to be funded from the general fund, but there's a placeholder in the budget. There's a placeholder. We won't have to add all at once. So this will, in a sense, be a budget variance that will, add to fund balance at the end of the year, but it will be a spot for us to have a placeholder to move forward with. So we are suggesting $200,000. We're not going to identify any one of these positions as being the cost. We're just going to build the amount into our budgets and, start to build in that placeholder. As we move down to social.
Can I just go to the blue up at the top first too?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I skipped.
No problem. That's why we're tag teaming it. So blue are priorities at the top. These have come up with the board in the past. So conversions of our major kitchen to the fresh food prep that we talked about. Taking our general fund and using it to construct those secure vestibules, or the Montessori and beginnergarten programming, transportation. Those are all really incorporated into our master planning as part of the top two are part of our November 2022 bond. So the food prep and the secure vestibules are built into that November 2022 bond. So you can see we kind of listen to past conversations the board has, and we've built them in our listening sessions. We heard some of the similar themes. So we built those in. Those are covered with the bond. And then as we look at the future of the Montessori and the location of the Montessori in terms of our strategic approach to that master planning, that Montessori and beginnergarten transportation, we believe, needs to be a part of that evaluation, because that really is a major equity obstacle for many of our families. So as we're looking at a recommendation for the future of Montessori and beginnergarten, you can be assured that transportation is going to be a part of that recommendation.
Okay.
So those will not be included in this budget conversation this evening because we're handling them through other processes.
So we move down, we have the middle schools, Chippewa and Quinoa, have identified the need for an additional middle school counselor. Currently, they each they have a full-time counselor in each of their buildings, and then they share another full-time counselor. So their request is to add 0.5, add a half at each, so they will each have 2 full-time counselors at the middle school level. And this was came out through the amount of times the counselors are spending with behavior needs at that level. The admin assistant for technology. Back in 2011-12, technology had an administrative assistant, and for their department, and that position was cut during budget reductions and was never added back. This is something Dr. Isom has talked about for quite a while, needing some additional support to help with purchasing, to help with, just those day-to-day things, assisting with help desk, someone to be there, because we have these repair depots now, and our tech staff are scattered throughout the district, and needing somebody dedicated who would be in the building to answer help desk phone calls, answer the doors when other people are busy, those types of things. We did for a year and a half. Director Fargo's administrative assistant was 3/4 time. So we tried to see what would it look like if we made that made that position temporarily full-time, and they help support the technology department. And that did assist, but not to the extent needed. So there was still gaps in the in what was needed for the position. So the request is for this to post a full-time admin assistant for technology to help support that department. And then also, just with the one-on-one devices and the parents and, and staff members trying to get support, they just need additional staff. Athletics. The participation fee, we've talked about this almost every year that we do have and we continue to have. I went out and looked at other districts' participation fees for athletics. We do have one of the highest rates in our neighboring areas. And there's, I know we've committed to trying to reduce this over the last few years. And, we would like to take another step forward and reduce this by $25 rate decrease across all the levels of our fees for that program. And again, no child is denied participation in athletics if they can't afford the fee. If they're, participating free and reduced lunch, we're made aware we do work with that family. Back in the 2021 school year, when this is before, this was that lovely time when the state was talking about that there were going to be dire dire financial impact because of the impact of COVID. And we were potentially going to be reduced over $600 per pupil after the school year was over. So it was still within the state's fiscal year. So we were going through a budget reduction. And what can we do? Because we can't afford after the year's over, $600 reduction. So one of the items that we reduced was our school improvement budgets. We reduced it by 75%. And these are those budgets that the buildings look at to help provide what does our building need for professional development that we can do as a whole, or we can maybe do some train the trainers, that type of thing. And so we are hearing that's a need, that our staff have a lot of needs right now, not just with, the current items, but it's a different items that that the staff are facing, and they want some more assistance with that in terms of professional learning. So our recommendation would be to restore that back to what it was prior to our reduction in 2021. Superintendent Hood, do you want to do the Lynx?
Yeah, so we had a Lynx program. That's a mentoring program where our high school students are paired with another high school student to help be mentors socially and academically for other high school students. And we started that in 2014 with one of our special ed teachers. And we had a total of about 12 students when that program started in one section. And our teacher, when we started that, did that in addition to a full-time special ed caseload. Well, the good news is that program has grown tremendously. We have 6 sections and 55 students with a special ed teacher that's trying to manage now that and a full caseload. And it's really a great problem to have because the program is in so much demand because our kids, all of our kids on both ends of that relationship are getting a lot out of it. So our teacher's now essentially juggling 11 sections of time through a 6-period day. So we talked with Heather Preco, our special ed director, and our high school administration and teachers, and they really value the Lynx program. We don't want to have to cut back the number of students that are getting the support or doing the mentoring. And honestly, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Mm-hmm. So the idea here is to add some FTE to the high school to accommodate that link time, and then also have that special ed teacher be able to, in addition, take on a coaching role to help support teachers and students that have disabilities in the gen ed setting. So pushing into the gen ed setting and help with co-teaching, help giving teachers strategies by which to interact with their special ed students more successfully, provide training and support on differentiated instruction, and facilitate those conversations with department heads and with teachers about how our special ed kids are doing in the general ed environment as another intervention as part of our multi-tiered system of support program. So the idea here is to kind of spin off that Lynx position to be a Lynx and special ed coaching position. Director Preco is in full support, so is our interim principal Howard. And then we would maintain the special ed FT we still have at the high school in terms of the resource caseload. So this again is an ask as an add to again continue servicing the Lynx program and provide support for our students, special needs students that aligns with our DEI goals.
The next one is our instructional supply budgets. Every year we have all of our buildings saying, you know, they don't have enough funds and teachers are spending funds out of pocket, and that they would, you know, appreciate an increase in their supply budgets that for when they work with their staff. So we are suggesting, talked about a level 1 priority of increasing it by 10% for the next school year. Student support advisors.
So the next one is our SSAs. We started with 2 student support advisors in across our 4 elementaries this school year, and that program was very, very successful, to say the least. And I don't know, Stacy, you could probably speak to this too, because I know you spoke to the elementary principals about this. So looking at our student population and the behaviors we're seeing, especially post-COVID, we met with the elementary leadership teams and tried to come up with a way to provide an additional layer of support, because of course, if you have 2 of those supports spread across 4 buildings, that means they're only in half of the buildings, and there's behavioral needs in each of the buildings every day. So Stacy, do you want to add a little bit about the rationale from the elementary principals? I know you worked with them on this.
Sure, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest things is these 2 SSAs have worked across with all 4 elementaries and building staffs to update their PBIS systems, which are our positive behavior systems across the schools, to make sure that they're culturally responsive. So we put in a lot of the work this year to really create a strong framework. But one thing we know is that when we're supporting students with behaviors, relationships are of the utmost value. And one of the strengths has been when that relationship, the person who's doing the check-ins, is split between 2 buildings. And so we're looking for consistency of students, and really that consistency to make sure that when we're implementing this culturally responsive PBIS, we're doing it with fidelity, and we can really be successful with that in all 4 of our elementary buildings.
And you'll note here subtraction on the right-hand side, the 185.2 minus 41.055. That was us working at, again, within our budgets to look at what are some of the other behavioral supports we've added. We have attempted to add behavioral aids in as a support across the elementaries. However, finding aids has been a challenge for us. So in trying to be budget conscious and meet the need in a more consistent way, we worked with the elementary principals to look at how we could offset the cost of those 2 additional SSAs would be by using the behavior aid budgeted item that we had added a few years ago, because we haven't been able to fill those or fill them consistently. So you can see that 144, 145 is the total impact. The 41.055 was previously budgeted for behavior aids, but we're saying now we would like to rebudget that to support the SSAs, which will just be more consistent, a more consistent approach for us. And those were the level 1s, I think, correct?
Yep, those were the level 1s.
And those added to just under $670,000.
Then we have the level 2s, which are more defined as, these are things we would like, we would want if we could. But they don't rise to that of a need. And in that, you'll see one of the first items is at the elementary level is increase of 2 social workers that are would be spread across the all four elementaries, so they would all get a 0.5. And part of that rationale was, the child's social emotional learning, with the past 3 years and 2 years,
Yes.
past 2 years, and how COVID has impacted ability to learn for the students and having, people there, the mental health, to ensure mental health, mental well-being. However, when we talked with the elementary principals and said, we can't do both. So if we had to look at, the student support advisors versus counselors, where do you think you get the biggest bang for your buck? What are you thinking would be the most beneficial? And they unanimously said the student support advisors for all those things Ms. Bailey talked about. So that's where they felt they could get the greatest, meet the greatest need of their students. So the elementary has identified the additional social workers as a level 2 need at this point.
And they just reminded us as well of years ago, we had counselors and social workers in buildings. And as you recall, now we just have social workers and they're split between both servicing our all students and also those that are on special ed caseload.
Quinoa and Chippewa were really doing this work together. They were suggesting or have identified a need of or a want of a 0.5 registrar that at both buildings. So that'd be a 1.0 position that would be split amongst 2 buildings. They're just said all of the roles and responsibilities for the individuals in those positions just continues to increase. Currently, Quinoa and Chippewa each have their own registrar within their building, but they also have some additional front office support of administrative assistants to the principals as well. So they do have a couple individuals already in the office, but with the increasing needs of the numbers of IEPs, scheduling meetings, for 504s, schedule changes, playing nurse to students, all of that they've identified as putting stress on their systems. So they had a want of an additional registrar to share between both buildings. There was a special ed. Special ed was talked a lot at all levels. You see one increase in the system at the high school with the Lynx and the special ed coach position. But all buildings are saying, and I believe there's an ELA coach, that's down further. But the next item too, you'll see is a resource teacher. So at the high school, that's a push in, and then there's this other special ed teacher. All across the board, it's saying we need more assistance to help do more for our special needs students. They're not meeting, we're not closing the gap. We'd like to do more. We would like more teachers to help provide services so we can have smaller caseloads and see the students more often. But what we talked about with Director Preco was we really needed to look at our special ed system as a whole versus, just adding staff to it, but continuing to do the same thing. We want to look at it just like we looked at operations and we looked at, all right, are we going to look at, continuing to do what we're doing with our night custodial? Are we going to try to bring it in-house? We know we need to do something different than what we had last year, beginning of last year, but we're wanting to look at the system as a whole to say, what can we do differently? That might involve more staff. We don't know, but we wanted to have that look first. And that was supported by Director Preco's to look at, we really need to look at the system first before we continue to add more staff and make sure what we are doing is providing that benefit to the students and making some of those gains for the students. So that's why you will see these as level 2 wants, because we do want to do more work and on the system as a whole first.
And then the level 2s totaled just under $462,000.
Then we have a few items here that are listed under the level 3 that we have on this list. We're keeping track of them, but we're not, these are really more dreams. For instance, Director Fargo would like to increase his admin assistant from a 0.75 to a 1.0. But this year we're trying out a pilot where we're taking the facility, the person who coordinates our night facilities, and she's doing it all in one position, his 0.75 as well as the facilities, to see how that plays out. We know facilities rentals has gone down with COVID, so as they start to come back up, will this individual be able to manage both within the one position, or do we need to look at the positions separately? So we're gonna look at it this year and see how that plays out. The ELA teacher at Chippewa, again, it's the same thing as the special education. Is we want to do more for our English language learners, but again, what is the system? What are we doing with the time, with the staff we have? Is what we're doing making a difference? We want to look at that first before, again, adding more staff to the buildings. So let's look at what we're doing. Let's find out what will get us the better returns, and then move forward if we need something additional. And we also have athletics uniforms on here. We do know, as we've talked about in the past years, that athletics, we hadn't had a budget for athletic uniforms for replacement. And I don't know how many years we haven't had that budget. The boosters used to pay for those, and then the booster group kind of has dwindled. I don't even know if it still exists right now, honestly. But right now we did receive funding from that Native American Heritage Tribal Fund to help pay for some of the uniforms because of the change in mascot. So what we'll be looking at in years forward is what amount on an annual basis do we need to set aside so we can replace our uniforms? And so they're not wearing uniforms that are 15 years old. So this is something that you will see again. Just at this point, we want to look at it a bit more. What are we going to need, and when will we start needing these funds? Because if everyone's getting new uniforms right now, we won't need this for a year or two, but we will want to look at that for the future. And are there questions regarding any of these?
I got a couple questions.
Mhm.
Some of these are probably real fast. Just help me understand this first line item. I just want to make sure I understand it. The 200 grand.
Yep.
Are we basically just putting a line item in the budget for 200 grand, and that's kind of just adding to our fund balance for a couple of years down the road? Okay, you had a much more eloquent explanation, but I just want to make sure I understood.
Or I was rambling. I don't know.
Awesome. And then another question with student support advisors additions, does that mean we'll have one for each building?
Yes.
Assigned to each building? So they're not going to be floating, it's going to be one.
Correct. They're not
assigned
going to
to
have
the building.
travel time between buildings.
Perfect.
Yes.
Awesome. Next question was about the addition of the admin assistant for tech. I just want to make sure I guess I understand. We just added a 0.25, right? But now we're convinced we need to add another 0.75 basically.
Right. We were doing 0.25 on a temporary basis to see if it helped, if that was enough to cover what he needed, and it was nowhere
And
near.
it wasn't anywhere near. Okay, so I guess that was my question, why we didn't go up like another 0.25. It was obvious that's not going to do anything. We need to go. Okay. And I guess my last question was about the whole, I guess uniforms brought it up, except I guess it's bigger than that. I just want to make sure when we say that the fund will cover some uniforms, are we getting, I just want to make sure we're not going to have Chiefs uniforms next year, or are we still, I mean, like, I thought that was kind of the point of the travel funds, and we put money in the budget last year. I mean, I want to make sure, I don't know, we're closing that chapter. How about that, moving forward?
So we're working on closing that chapter. Some of our uniforms don't even, they just say Okemos on them. They
Yeah.
don't say Chiefs. But what we really want to look at is, again, systems to sustain over time. So that's why that kind of showed on on the budget priority list, and Director Lentz and I have talked about it, is we need to build in over time to our budget a replacement for that. So that's not falling on boosters that may not exist. Then you have inequities in terms of what you can offer. Some students get it if their boosters do it, some don't. If they don't have a strong boosters group, that's an issue for us. The other thing we want to look at is making sure we spread some of those expenditures out over time. So then you don't have to replace, all the uniforms aren't old at the same time. So Liz and I are doing some planning with that and working with Director Brown on the replacement cycle to see where those may lay. There's going to be some new uniforms. I can tell you which ones when I talk with Tempe. I don't want to speak off the cuff on those. But we also want to be careful about phasing those in so we don't have to replace them all the same year.
Is there a priority, I guess, on moving past the previous mascot?
Yes.
And that, okay, so
that is the top priority.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good. And I guess
Yeah.
along that same lines, I just want to make sure, are we still in the process of kind of replacing the signage and all that things? Like I think of the football stadium and the basketball court and all that stuff. Is that,
Yes.
I mean, is that part of the process and happening? It's funded. We're all good there.
Director Fargo's been working hard on that. You want to come up, Director Fargo?
He has some great renderings of the high school floor, gymnasium floor.
Oh,
I know, I don't have it, and of the football field.
In the
stadium
press box and some decals for around
Yeah, we're working with our vendor that we used for the imaging for some of the decaling and stuff like that. We painted the inside of the football locker rooms over spring break.
Oh.
So those are completely now just gray inside. They actually look pretty good. But as far as the two big items or the bigger items was the football field and the high school floor for the basketball court. So the basketball court is going to be completely sanded down, redone. That starts June 20th. So that'll be done this summer. And I'm sure we can share. We've kind of got locked in.
Pictures for you.
Yep, we've kind of got locked in what we're doing there for a logo in the middle and all the coloring on the court and everything. It's going to be really nice. And the football field, we have renderings for that. We've decided to do just the big wolf head image in the middle. And then we have to change out the end zones for the Okemos and the Wolves because it's a different font now than what's in there. And if we tried to just change the letters, they'd have to patch in the maroon in it. You'd be able to see from the stands that it's not the same color. So we have to change the whole end zone. And then we went with the big logo because the same thing would happen in the center. If you just tried to cover what's there, you'd have to patch in green in spots and you'd be able to see. So we're going to do a big enough logo that it just covers that whole section. So it'll look nice and neat when we get done.
Is it ready for the fall?
That will not be.
Okay.
And that's a material supply issue. The rendering, the design of it would be ready to go, but they said chances are the material would come in toward the end of our football season. So then it would be a weather thing, rather they could do it. So chances are it will probably get pushed to next summer just because we want it done right. I don't want to push it into cold weather and then it doesn't adhere or something.
And lacrosse.
And lacrosse is going to be using it. So yeah. So chances are football will probably get pushed next summer, but we'll have everything lined up, ready to roll. But the high school basketball court, that'll be ready for the season.
And then Tempe's looking at other things with you in terms of decaling and branding and press box improve,
we're having fun. We're
Yeah.
thinking of all the stuff we can do.
It's pretty exciting.
So,
Sounds like
And
it's on
again-
the front burner. So that's
Yeah,
good.
and again, that doesn't come out of this budget, just to be clear for those at home or our trustees, that's out of the Native American Heritage Fund or our Sinking Fund.
Sinking
Thank you.
Fund.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I wanted to follow up on the, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of special education items in this budget. And I love that we are looking at the special education as a whole. I definitely think that that's needed. But I'm wondering, as we're trying to, formulate and think about what our budget priorities are, how does that relate to the overall look at the special education system? Like, will there be a point where we'll get a report, or like, how does the future of that process look like as it pertains to actually considering our budget items?
So I'd be happy to bring Director Preco to talk with you about that in more detail. We actually started looking at this just prior to COVID in terms of what does the research say? What do other schools' special ed models look like, and what are their results? In terms, and what we're looking at is how we utilize the teachers we have. Right now, most of it's kids are going to a special ed room for a part of their day to get support. And what we're trying to look at is that what the research says is the best model? Maybe it's some of that, or maybe it's also pushing in at the point of instruction and co-teaching in a classroom with a special ed teacher that can service students as well. So I would expect that we would have special ed teachers involved, some parents involved, staff involved, and do some committee work, share our learnings with the board, and then any recommendations we have.
Thank you.
Yes.
Two quick questions. One is it's broader than this, but the elementary social worker positions and the half at each elementary school. And I'm just wondering the logic of doing that when two of the schools are going to be significantly larger than the other two, at least for the next several years. And does that, the teacher per student ratio is going to be really much smaller at Bennett Woods and Hiawatha, right? Not Chippewa, no, Hiawatha. Than at here and Cornell.
We have Assistant Superintendent Bailey help with that.
So right now, while we do have a social worker at each building, we have different numbers of students that have it on caseload for special education. So as Superintendent Hood said, our current social workers, it's not the same exact across the district because one building might have more students on caseload. So then fewer number of general population students can be serviced. So with this addition, we would want to do an equalization to make sure that, just like you said, that there's equitable access for our general education students. We know our special education students will get what's required within their IEP, but we would then look at what does this look like for our general education students. And I would say another factor that goes in, not just the quantity of students in that ratio, it's the level of need. And so sometimes the sheer quantity doesn't necessarily identify our most needs. So that would be in the conversation as well.
So it won't be exactly exactly half time at each one, but
Yes.
you'll figure that out. Okay,
Yes,
that's great.
yes.
And remember, some of our buildings also have some of the categorized programming, so those self-contained classrooms and others don't. And those just tend to have some more need for social work support as well.
And then my other question was just, I'm wondering, we've talked about this for many years now, non-English language instruction at the elementary school. If there's ever, we're going to have funding for putting that in place.
And are you referring to having a specialized program, like an immersion program,
I
or?
don't know, we've been discussing this for like a decade now.
No,
and
I was just wanting to make sure that that's what you were
Or like as a-
referencing was an
I
immersion.
I don't know what we're gonna do. I just think at some point we should talk about it again, because like I think we sort of pushed aside for 2 years during COVID, but
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. So the idea of thinking about, would our elementaries need another rotation? So right now we have 3, we have PE, music, and art. And that has been something that both the teachers and principals at the elementary level have talked about. As you know, based on the size of our buildings, we have more than 3 sections at a grade level, which means then we're not getting common planning time. So it's actually could potentially be a win-win. So next year we'll be doing research on, if we were going to have something, what would that look like? We have some out of the box thinking. And so we want to look at what would that look like for our teachers for common planning? How might that improve some outcomes for our students? And could we provide some additional opportunities? I know that Patty Trelstead did an amazing job with the committee, and I've got all those notes. And so bringing that back forward and then looking at, are there some other things from our strategic design as well as our equity plan? We've got some innovative thinking. So we want to flesh some things out, and hopefully next year at this time, we would be prepared to bring that back to you with some accompanying research.
okay, yeah, that's great, because I don't think we're ready to do it now, but
No,
just
yep.
just as long as we're letting the community know
It's on
we're
the docket,
rethinking
yep.
about this again.
Yes,
And we could-
absolutely.
and we might be able to find a win-win with that potentially. So
Any other? I have a question. We were talking a lot. I'm not asking a question for clarity. I'm asking for a question about the omission of something that I thought was going to be here. Cornell and those items that were identified, I don't see a dollar amount ascribed to whatever we need to address the issues at Cornell
Yeah.
that were I mean, we got a flood of emails.
Yes.
So can
Great
we, yeah.
question. Yep. So what our plan is to kind of address, so I believe what trustee Lynn is talking about, just to bring everyone, because I think we've connected to make sure everyone is aware that the Cornell change isn't going to happen until 3 years down the road, but there's some immediate needs that need to be met at Cornell. So we're sending in Director Fargo, Tyler Pinkster, and Chrisman to look at a kind of critical needs at Cornell to kind of get them through the next 3 years in terms of what are the needs for warm, safe, and dry, in terms of, you want to say you have to deal with what you need for 3 years. So our thinking there is that's the cost of us doing business, not a budget priority that we would use sinking fund monies for, or if we saw any opportunity for past, or future bond funds to potentially make some of those changes with it, we would do that. So once we have that assessment, I'd be happy to bring that back to the board and share what that is. But we're gonna kind of do a special look at what's worth investing in the next 3 years in that building, knowing it's going to be torn down, so we can be good stewards of the investments that we will make into that building. And then our plan is sinking fund, or if some of the bond 2022 funds can cover it, would come from there.
And I appreciate you
Yeah.
ensuring that we had clarity. So I think that I just want to make sure we're all clear on my question is not only those items that will bridge for 3 years, but there were some quite disconcerting comments that were made in, even by faculty about the current situation. And I don't know whether the current situation in terms of the conditions, you used a little quip. I don't know, warm, dry, and
Yeah,
safe.
warm, safe, and dry,
Okay. All right. So I'm imagining that there are some budget implications for the immediate, not just filling the gap for 3 years, but immediate, warm, safe, and dry, that would have prevented us. There's some budget implications that may have prevented us from just going ahead and doing those things. So I just want to make sure that we're addressing not only the bridge items, because that I would expect that we're going to do for the, bridge for the next 3 years. But I mean, immediately, like, oh my goodness, I don't have pearls on, but clutch my, really. So I just want to make sure that we are addressing or providing the provision from a budget standpoint for any of the needs that we have at Cornell, bridging to 3 years and doing that assessment. That's wise. But whatever we need to do to make sure that warm, safe, and dry is happening like tomorrow. That's what I just want to make sure. And if there are some resource implications,
we'll come back. Yep.
I want to make sure that you all have whatever you need.
Thank you.
I don't see those in here, and I just want to make sure that if they need to be in here, perhaps we'll add them or whatever, because it's my priority that should be.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And thank you for ensuring that we had clarity. Yep. Thank you.
We want to talk about the homework, Director Lentz. Is the board ready for how the homework works? Okay.
So what Superintendent Hood has up on the screen, can you minimize it a little bit?
I can, yes.
Thank you. So on the left-hand side is each of the items that was listed in this document, as well as what the budget impact is. And then and I'll change the homework due date. That was the old due date. The assigning the support level. So what I need from each of you individually would be to go through your list, and I'll email it out tomorrow morning, and then assign, what you agree with this item, you somewhat agree with it, or you're level 3, you don't agree with this line item, and where administration put and where we rated that. At the bottom, there's areas, a couple of lines, if there's anything else that you have thought about that should be considered, that we should be talking about and not losing track of it. So maybe it's not something that is considered maybe in this budget, but it's something that should be talked about for the future budget, such as the immersion program or another
Language
special.
yep.
So something like that. And then, so we don't lose track of it. So then what we'll do then is summarize those, come up with what we've done in the past is, if, let's say all board members agree with something that we've put on, we show you what those are. If there's areas where there is not agreement, then we bring it back to the next board meeting. We'll talk about that as a group to come up with we have the board come up with a group recommendation of where that should fall in the final budget.
Can I just ask a clarification question? Am I putting 1, 2, or 3, whether I agree with the administrative recommendation or whether I agree that this should be in the budget?
You agree with the recommendation, with where it's at within the recommendation.
Okay. So if I put disagree, maybe that means I want it somewhere else. Or like, I think, I just want to make sure I understand what I'm doing here. So like in the level 3s that you put, the not, the dreaming area,
Yeah.
say I really love it. I'm not saying I do,
Yeah,
but yeah, say I really love it. So if I put disagree there, you're going to think that means I want it higher.
Not necessarily. I
You
want to
see what I'm
know.
asking?
Last year, didn't we just rank them how we wanted them? 1, 2, and 3? rather
Did we
than, like,
rank it?
Agree and disagree?
Needs, wants?
I think
Yeah,
we
we
did. I
did.
think we
Yeah.
did.
Should we go that way?
You guys do your ones, you guys do
Yeah.
your 2s, and you do your
Okay.
3s.
I can change that.
That's more, yeah. I was
Okay.
just confused when I was,
Yeah.
okay.
Maybe I grabbed an older document
that's
that
okay.
I,
So we'll revise that, and then you've seen our 1s, 2s, and 3s, so now you weigh in, and you weigh in. If you think it's a 1 in your eyes, you put it as a 1. If we have it at 1, but you think it's a 2 or a 3, you put it at 2 or a 3. And then we'll share those.
So
Okay,
really,
go
the scale's the scale's the same. It's just what it means.
Yeah.
It is.
exactly.
Is there a number you want us to shoot for a total? Or just rank them how we want them?
We'll be looking at that at the next meeting.
That's
So-
interesting. So I'm going to ask a question about the Lynx coordinator one again, then, since we have clarity on how we're doing this now. Just so that I'm clear, in the explanation here, we're suggesting that this new position will provide support for the classroom teachers in terms of special education. So this is an advisory, kind of additional advisory kind of bit of information or support. I thought that we already did that. So I just want to understand, how is that advisory portion different from what we are already doing?
I can speak to that a bit.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
so that's one portion, that is one part of this job.
Mhm.
What this does is right now, yes, our special ed teachers advise their peers on their caseloads and on
Mhm.
students in their classes. What they don't have the flexibility to do, because they're assigned kids during those hours, is actually go visit the teacher, go see the student in that environment. This would free up a teacher to be able to actually do that, to talk to the teachers on their planning hour, but to go into the classroom and actually see what's going on. Can we do some co-teaching? Can I give you a strategy? Right now, our special ed teachers don't have that opportunity because they're locked into their caseloads with kids already in their classrooms.
Okay. All right, that was a period. That meant
Yeah.
don't lean in anymore.
Okay.
But I'm going to lean in some more
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I don't think I get it. So I understood what you said. If they're already busy, how is adding this additional person with additional work going to? The whole spectrum of these people are in the high school are very busy. So you're just going to have to lay that out differently for me, because I don't see how one person is going to free up everybody. That just Can
Sure.
you just make that very crystal clear?
So a special education teacher at the high school has a caseload, and all of those students have a certain number of minutes that are required by law.
Mhm.
So their day is scheduled with those caseload hours, which doesn't give them any additional flexibility outside of that to support the collaboration with a general education teacher to support special education students in the classroom. So this role, while there are other duties that are assigned regarding the Lynx, it does provide more flexibility to allow that educator to really build capacity with not just special education teachers, but general education teachers in supporting our special education students in all settings. So as we're thinking about, I'll take this a little bit level up, as we're thinking about what Director Lenz said and Superintendent Hood about reevaluating our special education system and looking at what are the settings in which our students are going to be the most successful. This person will have a key role and we'll have to look at what does that data show. So when they're able to support what science am I thinking of?
Yeah, the integrated sciences, yeah.
We have a science that is taking away their in their studies class for next year in their biology. Biology classes will have all of our students together, which means that we're going to have a wider range of skills within that. So one task that this new position will do is supporting those biology teachers as they have a wider range of abilities. But the research shows that when we do offer special education students the opportunity to learn in classrooms with their peers, that they do have higher learning outcomes. So that's a very specific example of one thing that they'll be doing, that we'll be researching as part of our overall research on how are we best supporting our special education students.
Okay, so thank you for that. That was very helpful. What I gleaned from what you said is that we have a gap in our ability to provide the fundamental services from a special education standpoint. And that is the problem that we're trying to solve. It's just an additional icing on the cake that this person would also be able to help with Lynx. Is that a correct statement?
I would say both the Lynx and the building teacher capacity will both support our special education populations. So
Okay.
not that the Lynx is just an additional add-on, that's also a research-based practice that is supportive of our students. So
Okay.
that is a designated need, and we're saying, what does that look like to build capacity? As you know, every time I come to you, we look at our special education data, and it is not meeting any of our expectations. So we're trying to be creative while we're still going to do a further study of the overall system.
Okay.
Maybe this would also be helpful just for my own, children in the special education system. And what I kind of envision from what you're explaining is I know that when my boys have gone to resource room, they have a very planned approach of what they need to be working on in that resource period to achieve the goals of their IEP, which in a 40-minute time period, maybe 50-minute at the high school, that chews up a lot of time. And it didn't leave time left over for them to get a lot of the other type of support that they need to get work completed, write essays, work on tests, do that kind of support. And I'm envisioning this would help bridge that particular gap, because when they go to resource period, they're working on their objectives. They're getting their frequency, they're reading this passage, they're working on their goals of their IEP. And oftentimes there was a struggle to get, there's other supports that are needed when you struggle in school outside of meeting the goals of your IEP. And I do feel like this position helps to try to bridge that gap to also help the gen ed teachers give the support that those particular students need in that classroom instead of always having to come to the resource room to try and get that support, because there just isn't enough time. So that's what I'm envisioning this position trying to do. Is that helpful?
That
Or
is more
accurate?
illuminating. I just fundamentally think from the standpoint of especially people in the, general community, being clear about what our baseline
Yeah.
of service is so that we don't have additional conversations. It's just having the Lynx coordinator piece on here. Although it's research-based, I don't know that I'd answer the question, my priorities the same way, seeing Lynx coordinator as opposed to special education coach. Those invoke two separate things for me from a priority standpoint, especially because I know that Executive Director Lentz is not going to say, put all ones and we'll be good. I mean, so that's just, that's not how it's going to go. So that's just my feedback. I think that if we're going to have this discussion, we definitely need to precede the discussion, not the budget discussion, this systems-based approach to interrogating the effectiveness and efficiency of our special education services. We need to have an educational component prior to the baseline. Let's you understand that's just my feedback. So thank you. I'm good. All right.
When would you like the homework due by?
Friday.
Friday?
So I'll get that up to you tomorrow morning and make the couple changes we talked about.
And then we'll bring this back to you at the next board meeting
Yes.
with the new budget assumptions. And then we'll look at, again, where those level ones had consensus, level twos, level threes, and have discussions about ones that did not. Thank you.
Okay. Now we're on to flexible furniture. I thought you were just going to roll.
I can roll.
Oh,
Sounds
okay.
good. So Assistant Superintendent Bailey's here, and we got Director Fargo if we need it as well, but he'll be up next. Here on deck, Mark. So Stacy, I know you promised the board you'd come back with some additional furniture purchases for the 2019 bond. I think that's what this is.
Yeah, so what you have this evening for you is for our high school counseling office. And so this includes both staff and student furniture. And it's really trying to create an environment where students feel safe, students feel supported, and we can provide those services in up-to-date facility settings. So really trying to be comprehensive and update all of that with our 2019 bonds. And so this was compiled on the work of our counselors and our administrators. And again, it's part of the 2019 bond.
So since this is over the bid limit, this would come back to them at the next board meeting for approval.
Yes.
And the number is $95,907.23.
Yes. And I hope to bring library furniture to you the next time. So
Wow.
we're rocking and a
Pumping
rolling.
it together. Yep.
Furniture. Okay. No questions? Okay.
Then we'll have Director Fargo come up and talk about, again, 2019 bond. This is the locker replacements at Quinoa. So Director Fargo.
Thank you. In 2019 bond, they had a section in there for redoing lockers at Quinoa Middle School. So we did send that out for bids, and 2 companies came in and walked that system and bid on it. And as we put in your packet, we had a company come in at $421,000 and we had one come in at $222,000. So being such a vast difference, I reached back out to the architect and asked them to check the lower bid and go through the bid document again and make sure that everything was covered. I didn't want to get surprised and find out, oh, I thought you guys were taking them out. So it is all covered. The guy, they did verify they're comfortable with their bid. The higher bid was an out-of-state company, so I think that kind of factored into their higher bid price. So the $222,700 is what we're going after for doing the lockers. The reason for doing the lockers, which I confirmed when we went through there, is that they're too small, the condition of the lockers, and we need more lockers because there are students that don't have lockers. So those are kind of your 3 factors of why we're doing those. And we were able to, even in that price, add like 100 lockers to that school. So the kids that are kind of at the orchestra end that had to go to the other end to get their locker. Now they'll have some right
Closer
down
to
that
the
main
Montessori,
corridor.
Yeah. And the idea is then to repurpose those lockers to the
Yes,
new.
we
Quinoa
asked, going into this, when I did the walkthroughs with the companies, that was one of the demands we had, that these are actually able to be taken down and taken and moved, depending on the future use of that building. So they did confirm that they can do that as well.
So this is a great example of leveraging that 2019 bond to meet some needs that our students have now. And again, remember that Quinoa timeline is, and we're talking six plus years.
Yeah.
So kids can get the use of those lockers for 6+ years at Quinoa, and then we can move them to the new location.
Yeah.
And this, my understanding is this has come in under what we budgeted in the bond.
This is under what was budgeted in the bond by almost half, maybe, or close. So we are pursuing some other possible quotes to see if we can extend that locker situation out possibly to another building as well.
So we'll bring that to you. We may be able to do more than we expected with that part of the bond.
Yes. So,
Great.
any questions on that at all? Or?
I'll just say this is really exciting because my Quinoa student, if I pack her lunch with the lunchbox thing sideways, it won't fit in her locker.
Yeah.
She loses her mind
Yeah.
every morning. So I appreciate this. So her lunch
Yeah.
isn't all flipped over and gross.
And I think those are like 10 or 11-inch wide lockers right now. And,
Oh, yeah, they're
and the new ones will be 15 inches wide by 15 inches deep. So
Yeah.
they'll
And are
be
those-
pleased.
I mean, I really think those are the lockers from when I was there. I mean, does that
Oh,
seem
yeah.
right?
they
Oh,
are.
it could.
Yes.
Yeah, they're
I
original to the
went
building, I would
I have
think.
no doubt that they are. Yes.
And
I gotta be careful how I say that, like they're ancient or so. Oh, those are ancient, because I
You're
could get in
older than me,
trouble too.
Years now.
I mean, they're still
You are
almost brand new.
wise.
Yeah.
You are wise.
Yes.
All right. So thank you for those 3 items. Are there any other matter items? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I think we need to acknowledge the shooting that happened last week. And I think that all of us as a board, I think we should discuss how we would like to work to help end stuff like that. I really would like to, I had a letter that I was going to bring to everybody for our advocacy committee. And then I was at a Lugnuts game all day, so I didn't quite finish it. And I think it's important too that Mary's here when we do discuss it, so we have the whole board. I would like to see us writing at least a letter to send to every senator, every rep, state and US. I really like to encourage all of our parents to reach out and write to your lawmakers, and I'm happy to provide everybody's addresses, addresses of where to send those. I'm happy to have a sample letter they can use. I think that we just really need to start reaching out and doing more and taking a stand. I'd like to invite every lawmaker to come and sit with our kindergartners in a lockdown drill and experience that, because that's like nothing you've ever experienced if you haven't done it. And I just want to read, I had a parent reach out to me and send me a copy of what she found in her second grader's Friday folder was a writing assignment he did. And now I'm going to cry like you guys did last week. But so this is her second grade son saying, "It's scary to think about the gunshots in Texas. I'm scared if they come to our home. I'm scared." So a second grader shouldn't be living in a world where he's scared that somebody's going to come shoot him in his classroom. So I really think we need to step it up. And we as board, we as an administration, we as a community need to do more for our kids. And we can't just sit here again. We talked about this 6 months ago at Oxford, and nothing has happened. And there are common sense gun reform that we can speak up for that will keep our kids safe. Things like red flag laws, secure storage, holding parents responsible or holding gun owners responsible if their guns get used in a crime. And we need to do something because we can't sit here anymore. So hopefully we'll have more discussion next week, and I'm hoping to have a letter that we can all proof together, read together, and decide where we're at. And Jamie and I will work on that more.
Well, I was gonna, as your fellow advocacy committee member, I'd be happy, maybe we should kind of map out what we envision next steps might look like for us to be able to discuss as a board in an upcoming meeting. to actually make actionable items to talk about.
I agree.
I think that would be our next steps.
Absolutely. And I would encourage everybody at home to, all of our community members to write letters, you know, how you feel about it, how your children feel about it. I mean, I think having your kids write letters is not a bad idea. I will say, as much as, when you're writing your letters, maybe don't insult them, call them names. When I know we've all written angry emails like that before and just hit send, but I can say as people who get those emails, it's not as well received as you might think, just to get your anger out. I think if you really come at it with a, respectful manner and how we can all work together on this solution, because this shouldn't be a partisan issue. This should be everybody coming together to help our kids, because we can't keep doing this. We can't send our kids into this environment and our teachers in there. Our teachers shouldn't be asked to make that choice.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Of course, the student focus is primary, but thank you for that last point too. Because,
Absolutely. We shouldn't ask our teachers to choose between their students and coming home to their own kids later on.
and our teachers are here to teach.
Right. This is not their responsibility.
So, some of the ideas that are being tossed around in terms of, teachers with guns or arming teachers, our teachers want to teach.
Yep.
They want to teach.
Mhm.
And I'll have more to say about that later, but
Yes.
Just to say, it's just not surprising at all that you have a mental health crisis among teens. When if you talk to, and I talk to about this issue, hundreds of freshman students every year, about they're just frustrated and sad and angry and just anxious every day about going to school. And even with, it just has having more social workers dealing with the trauma of going to school for people under this fearful, my daughter's told me for 6 years that the first thing she does when she goes into a new classroom is to figure out where she can hide. That she, if she makes it to graduation this weekend, she's going to be surprised. She never expected that she was going to, this is just what happens to people in the country we're living in today. And I think it's really, I think this is, not beyond just the gun thing. I think we really need to point out like what this is doing to young people in the country.
Mhm.
People,
And I will say that I think out of all of that, our meeting last week, when so many big decisions were made, to me, the most important part that we had contracted with an assessment firm who will come and look at our security and our future needs. To me, what odd timing for us that we did that the night before. So I'm most thankful about that. And then I've been reading social media posts all week, parents responding in different parent Facebook groups or whatever, pointing out like, well, I think I saw this door left open or that, or I just want to make sure everybody in our community understands that we all need to do this together. I mean, if you do see something like that at a school where you think a door has been unlocked or, left open, call the principal right then, call the office, if you're seeing students letting other students in, because I think it really does take all of us to make this change. And it's just.
Well, what do we say to our kids? It's okay to say, right?
Right.
It's okay to say
Yep.
anything.
No,
If you see something, say something. So we should all be living that truth as
We
well.
should. And it's not like I think some people think, well, it's not my place, or I don't want to be a busybody, but I mean, we're past that, So.
Yeah.
We can't keep doing it. As Vin was saying, like, I keep thinking, oh God, there's only 2 weeks left of school. Thank God my kids are making it through another year. It shouldn't be that way.
so is my understanding the will of the board then is to bring this back for further discussion after our advocacy committee has met?
Yep.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you.
So thank you for bringing up that topic. It's very difficult to broach that topic without a lot of emotion. So thank you for managing that. I have one, is it one or two? One item. I haven't had an opportunity to talk with you about this, but I wonder if there is benefit in us being as attentive as possible to some of the input that we receive from the community in terms of transparency in our communication as it relates to the communications over the last month or so. I think we had a significant amount of input from our community. And I think that from a learning standpoint, from an application of learnings standpoint, it would be probably responsible of us as a board to at least have a discussion about our process and especially setting expectations in terms of the transparency of communication and our process in terms of being committed to that. Yet I remind you of together. Together. So I think that that's one thing that's been, I just wonder if other board members have any thoughts about that since we are in our discussion time. I just wanted to, if there's benefit in that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so, okay.
No, yeah, thank you, Trustee Lane. I absolutely agree. And the feedback about process, feedback about communication or lack of, if we believe in equity and making sure that those that are impacted by our decisions are at the table and are heard, then we can't ignore our learnings from any of our part of our community on that. So I think that should be the expectation for administration. And I don't want to speak for the board, but I'll say for the board because that's at the core of our equity work. So, yeah.
Definitely. And again, I think that the only way that the community has the opportunity to weigh in or even knowledge of what we're actually doing is when we have conversations. So I do have one other thing. I wonder if we have, we're at the place, again, I know Trustee Bolton and Trustee Lyon-Callow, we've been here before, where we need to take a critical look at our agenda and making sure that we are staying true to trying to complete our discussions within a 3-hour interval. We've been going over that for longer than the discussions on the associated with the bond. And I wonder if we just need to take another critical look at that and refine some of our practices and talk about some of our expectations in terms of the agenda. We've been through this before. We had MASB meetings about how we can, from a parliamentary procedure standpoint, from a discussion, all of the elements of our agenda. So I think that there might be an opportunity for us to go into 2022, 2023 with a renewed focus on keeping our agendas within our at least 3-hour time span. I don't think that our administrators would have any objection to that. But
are they clapping back there? They're not if you're at home.
No, they're not.
Yes, we would welcome that conversation.
I wonder with that myself, in that when, I think back to our lengthy meetings and a lot of the rich discussion and whatnot that happens amongst us. I am curious as to the process of reining that in. From those of you that have been veteran school board members, how do you do that?
Boy, I don't have an answer to that question.
That is my, I wonder, being that just a lot of times meetings get lengthy because we're just having, we have pretty hefty agendas. So maybe that's a place to start. But the second is when we're in these rich discussions, our meetings end up getting pretty long.
I think that if I remember, and I don't remember what the details were, but the MASB person who led that had some specific suggestions
Yes.
about how to structure meetings differently or some meetings do this and some meetings have more of those discussions.
Mhm.
And so if we took the discussion and focused it on one meeting and instead of at every meeting, that maybe we could get more business, like have a business, well, I don't remember the details,
Yeah,
but
it was a business meeting and then basically a work session. Instead of having 2 regular meetings a month, they'd have a meeting where all the business gets taken care of and then a meeting where it's more discussion oriented.
Okay,
maybe that would,
I like that idea.
yeah,
My worry on, and I don't like to be limited when we're talking, like, you know what I mean? Sometimes we get in real good discussions and we're like, oh, we have to move on, you know, and I feel like we didn't finish a topic necessarily like we should. I like that idea of, work sessions are great because you can really open up and talk.
Yeah.
So that was another opportunity, creating forums for us to pontificate. And we don't do a lot of that. I'm looking specifically at Trustee Lyon-Kello because both of us pontificate a lot. But I mean, you know, we don't have a lot of opportunities to pontificate. We are to share our thoughts with one another. So there are a lot of strategy items that we could employ. I think that it would be helpful if we either pulled in MASB or for a list of what those strategies are, or we just pulled out that documentation from what we discussed previously and gave our thoughts on it. But I just think that should be one of the items on our list. So not to pontificate anymore. And that was a compliment, Trustee Lyon-Kello, pontification. That's for heady people. All right. Are there any other matters that we need to attend to?
I pontificated about one thing.
Okay.
I just thought that we got a bunch of letters from people about who are in the Cornell neighborhood in the last week, of people who were saying how appreciative they were and how they really want to not just but continue to work with us on passing the bond and stuff, things like that. So I thought that was really encouraging with all of, you know, those type of comments. And there was one by a political science teacher that I thought was very interesting.
Was moved by that one.
Yeah, thank you for noting that.
Definitely. Okay, that was brief pontification. Anyone else? Okay, very good. Our next item is the attending to a motion to adjourn to executive session.
I'll make that motion. I move that the board adjourn to executive session pursuant to section 8, parent A of the Open Meetings Act for the purposes of contract negotiations.
Support.
Thank you. And is there any discussion associated with this?
There's that.
Okay, then this requires a roll call vote.
Dean Bolton,
Aye.
Vincent Lyon-Kello,
Yes.
Katie Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Melanie Lynn,
Yes.
Andrew Phelps.
Aye.
And I vote yes.
Okay, that is 6 in the affirmative. The motion passes, and we will now adjourn to executive session.
And then I will just let people at home know. Yep, you got it.
No, you go
Okay,
ahead.
that when we return and reconvene from executive session, that we're just going to end the meeting now. So we're going to stop our broadcast and the board will just reconvene and adjourn at the end of the executive session.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for that.
We're just gonna do it here. Or we're gonna go on.
We'll go in the back.
I'm gonna be right back.